Okay. All right. So let's now talk about life in the village. Okay, and I'll try to hurry up because I see PK is sound asleep or he's listening. Okay, so life in the village was interesting. What was a slave village like? Okay, so in the mid 18th century, this was in the 1700s. Okay, I have four pictures here of a typical slave village. Okay, Reverend William Smith described the location of the slave villages that you see here. So we're talking about the map of Jessup. Okay, he says here that they live in small huts on the western side, all right, of our dwelling house, so that the plantations resemble a small town. The location, check this out. He said the location meant that we, okay, breathe the pure eastern air without being offended with the least nauseous smell. Okay, so they put the main house closer to the Atlantic. Okay, so that the breeze coming over they would be on the windward side, and the slaves or the enslaved Africans will be downwind. You see what I'm saying? So they don't have to, according to him, deal with the nauseous smell. Okay, so if you look at Jessup, which is this one here, okay, you will see this is a map from 1755 where the slave house is. Okay, and you see where the slave villages are, the slave houses are. Downwind, if the wind is coming from this side. You see, from the eastern side. Okay. Villages as well were often located on the edge of estate lands or in places that were difficult to cultivate. Okay, near deep gullies. Okay, in this case here, you will see that at Hermitage, which is this, it's on the side of a cliff. Yeah, and in Springley, in St. Kitts as well, another village. Okay, it's down in a gully, you know, and it being down in this gully, it was difficult to access really. Okay, so people could live down there. All right. So that was a typical slave village in the Caribbean in terms of food and diet. And this is interesting, some stuff I was able to pull up. Okay. So in many islands, people planted provisions, okay, on land which they were given. And more often than not, these lands were poor quality. Sometimes they were mountainous and stony. Okay. Because they wanted to reserve the good land for Cain. You see what I'm saying? All right. They planted provisions like sweet potato, yam, and plantains. Okay. Cassava was used to supplement wheat, I suppose. So they grate cassava, and you could use the grated cassava. They reared pigs and fowl and so on. Okay. And sometimes on Sundays, okay, because Sundays were generally given for rest and so on, they used to make markets. So you used to exchange some of those things. Saltfish, okay, was very interesting, all right, because saltfish or codfish, okay, was, very much traded between the Americans or the people in Newfoundland and the Europeans, okay. However, they were started to be salted and were used on West Indian plantations. And it was so profitable that the codfish farmers then, more or less shifted emphasis from the European markets to the Caribbean, okay, where they could produce very cheap salted fish, and supply them as basically slave food. You see what I'm saying? All right. Also, callaloo. Callaloo was documented by English and Dutch explorers as regular ingredients in dishes in Nigeria, Congo, Sierra Leone, and Angola way back in the 1400s. Okay, so callaloo comes from there. You see, the only difference really is that the callaloo they used to make over there, they used to use palm oil, okay, from the various palm trees and so on. But in the Caribbean, there's no palm oil. So basically, what it is, they supplemented the dashing bush and other things with, okay, is grated coconut and they squeeze out the milk, right, for the palm oil. And that sort of changed the flavor of the callaloo, okay, to what everybody knows today as callaloo. Yeah, so that is what that was. All right. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the mindset of the Europeans, who were these plantation owners? This guy, Jacques, one of the biggest plantation owners. This is his house in England. Okay. As you can see here, it's in, palatial splendor. This is the outside of the house. Okay. I didn't have room to show you the front of the house. Okay. But this is basically how these West Indian planters live. Okay. So in terms of Jacques himself, okay, he was one of the biggest plantation owners for over 200 years. 30,000 slaves died at the Jacques plantations in Barbados and elsewhere, according to Hilary Beckles, okay, who is the chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Committee, okay? And he says that the Jacques family has done more harm and violence to the black people of Barbados than any other people, okay? Today, Richard Jacques, okay, his like great grandson, sits as a serving member of the Conservative Party for South Dorset since 2010, okay? And that's how the thing, and there are many people, many people, not only in Britain, but also in the US, who can tie their relations right back to these plantation owners, okay? All right. Okay, many British people, in fact, were slaveholders, and this is a very interesting statistic. Okay, people felt that you only had a few big plantation owners, okay? But 46,000 people in the 1930s, right? Sorry, in the 1830s, were slave owners in England. You see what I'm saying? You had large slave owners like Jacques, okay, who hid behind their names and so on, like West Indian, planter. But you also had a whole heap of smaller middle class slave owners, all right? And there's one thing that I would say, many of them were women. Okay, so many middle class slave owners just had a few slaves, 2 or 3, probably 1. Okay, they possessed no land in the Caribbean. They were absentee slave owners. Okay, and they rented their slaves out to these landholders. So every year they would make like about £6,000. Okay, right? These people were vicars in the church, iron manufacturers, and lots of widows. Okay, because when the husband died, they would bequeath their quote unquote possessions to the wife. Okay, in fact, about 40% of the slave owners were women. And how do we know this? And I'll get to that in a second, in the next slide. Okay, is that all of these people were compensated, when slavery was abolished. Okay, right? Now, resistance was